and welcome back to the Mom and Mind podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Kat, and on this episode, I am speaking with Jacqueline Clemens. She's a veteran birth and postpartum doula, trainer, and mentor with over 20 years of experience serving diverse intercultural families. She is the author of A Doula's Guide to Improving Maternal Health for BIPOC Women and producer of the short film Jazz and the Blues. And she is a leading advocate for culturally competent care. And on this episode, we dive in and talk about the work that she does through Aki Onu to mentor the next generation of doulas and maternal health professionals to help them balance the heart of the work while building a sustainable business. We also talk about Medicaid and systemic barriers to care, as well as systemic barriers to doulas. And we also get to touch on her short film, Jazz and the Blues. I'm excited to bring you this conversation, so let's dive in and speak with Jacqueline. Welcome, Jacqueline. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Yep, I've been looking forward to our conversation. You're doing some really important work in the world, and so we're going to get all into it. I would love to know a little bit about how you got into the doula world and this work.
Yeah, so it was very organic. I've been doing this work 23 years now. I don't have a traditional pathway from what you might hear from most doulas. It started with a childhood friend becoming like the first one that became pregnant out of our friend group. And it was more of an organic support, seeing the areas of her life where she wasn't supported well by some other folks close to her and wanting to stand in the gap. Because of our existing friendship, it was like a natural rollover of support where myself, siblings, parents, the whole gang was there in the delivery room. And it was extremely impactful. To date, if you want to think of every intervention, every story, every anecdote that you could ever imagine, it all happened in that particular birth. And I walked away with a fire that just started burning. And I was like, yes, I need to make sure that ABCDEFG doesn't happen ever again to anyone that I know, but then also that I am there to support and advocate. And from there, I have attended the births of most of my family members and cousins and community members. And then about maybe 10 years later after that, I'm a creative. Obviously, we'll get into that a little bit later. Living my life and just doing my thing as a creative and supporting people, not even actually knowing the term doula. So I had another community member that I thought was a midwife approach me about taking a doula change. She said, "Oh, I think you would be a great doula." And I was like, "Girl, I do not catch babies, okay?" No, because that was my understanding of what I thought that she did. And so she goes, "Oh no, I don't, that's a midwife. We don't catch babies. We don't do this and that. Just come. I think you'll be great." And 13 years ago was when I started my official trained. Of course, I got tons of tools. It was an extremely dynamic community-based doula training in Maryland. And from there, I've pursued this work as a business and as a actual service offering. And so that's just a little bit about how I got into it. It's evolved a ton since that point, obviously, but that's the origin story.
Now we'll get into it, but you are doing a lot of things in this world and a lot of really important stuff. And I guess I could say groundbreaking, or thinking about things in ways that are super important. So anyways, I will let you explain what I'm talking about. Can you explain a little bit about your philosophy, your approach, how you support doulas?
Absolutely. So now I have a framework that I call the intrinsic doula design. And what that is based off of is understanding that each of us, and it doesn't just apply to doula work, but we bring ourselves to the work that we do. And in that being so, we have inherent strengths, weaknesses, interests, things that turn us off that we find absolutely whatever, we're very resistant to. And allowing us to explore our role in doula work through those lenses. Now, if you are not self-aware, if you're not really digging into what those different things are, you're just going to go, "Oh, I should be a birth doula." And you're just going to hop into whatever is happening on social media. And so with the intrinsic doula design framework, we are really walking through with the doulas that we're mentoring and coaching. We're helping them to highlight their strengths, highlight their interests, their weaknesses and what to stay away from, and match them with different aspects of birth work. And so what that might look like is if you were the girl that loved worms and dirt and things you didn't mind getting your hands dirty, you may love placenta encapsulation. If you are inherently an amazing communicator and teacher, you might look into focusing more heavily on childbirth education. If you don't like fluids, girl, you don't belong in that birth room. They're just basics. But when you see these beautiful pictures and images on social media, you can feel compelled towards things without really understanding whether or not it's a great fit. And so through that framework, we're helping to match people to different aspects of birth work so that, number one, they're operating in their zone of genius in this work. Number two, they can stay passionate for longer and not burn out as quickly.
That's so important.
Which is a thing. And then number three, when we're interacting with people, they can tell what we're passionate about and what we're not. They can tell when we're mismatched in our callings. And so to amplify the benefit for the families that we're serving as well, it's important for all of us to really be in our zone of genius so that we can operate and serve at the highest level possible.
That's so important. Just hearing you explain it, I'm like, yeah, of course. Why isn't everybody doing this? Just in terms of, for all of the reasons you said, both keeping the doulas themselves passionate and engaged and in line with what works for them, what helps them be in line, what works for the people they're helping. It just makes sense.
Yeah.
Make a lot of sense. So that leads me to believe that a lot of places are not doing this.
That's correct. In 2020, there was obviously a shift that we're all aware of. And I had been online discussing my work, sharing pictures, constantly being met with, what is a doula? And then I'm sure a Kardashian or two had a doula, talked about it online, and now everyone's, what are doulas? And I wanted to. And so I started getting all of these DMs. I took this online doula program. I feel extremely ill-equipped. And I'm like, okay, what's going on? And so come to find out, these people had gone through these online trainings, no hands-on component, virtual or otherwise, nothing to help them understand how to even communicate and talk with potential clients. And so they get this training and they get this information, but also the trainings were highlighting different things. So rightfully, some were centered on reproductive justice or cultural competency, but then they weren't really focused on actual skills training. Some were very heavily focused on skills training, and they weren't at all involving any of these other components. And so I began and started a mentorship program at that time. It's called this Spirit Song Doula training, but the other piece was, as I explained, it's evolved into the intrinsic doula design framework, but you are a part of this. I need to get to know you. You need to get to know you. And infusing this personal development piece into this work so that people could move through their path, their career with a level of self-awareness that was not being talked about. And so from there, that mentorship has developed into one-on-one mentorship, to group mentorship, to consulting with maternal health agencies, to really bring this framework in and help their clients get connected more passionately to what we do in this work. And so we all have different learning styles. I think the person is just as successful that is mentored by me and says, oh my gosh, I don't want to do any of this. This is actually not what I thought it was going to be. That is still, to me, successful because we don't want you figuring that out on a family. And impacting their birth experience. I don't want you going, and just introducing all these things and these experiences with a client, and now you've tainted someone else's birth experience, maybe in a negative way. And so if we can flesh all of that out on the front end through training and actually infuse it into the trainings and preparing them, I think that we're doing everyone a wonderful service. And then likewise, making sure that doulas are prepared to operate a business, whether they want to or not. In this world, even if you're bartering, you have to understand some of the basics of business and business development. And so that's another piece that I'm very passionate about, pretty much like infusing that heart and soul into the business development piece. I don't think it's separate.
No.
But I think the confidence that people have, you can't be confident and develop confidence unless you actually do the work.
You're absolutely right. And I wonder too, I think this is true in a lot of kind of the helping professions, that often people are coming with a very big heart, wanting to serve and wanting to help and support. And the kind of structural part of that, the money part of that, the what does that look like, nuts and bolts, can get really confusing, and or people will start to give away their time and their knowledge and everything without compensation sometimes, or without an exchange with whoever they're working with, and that ends up leading to burnout and it not being sustainable.
Absolutely. And I've had to take breaks over the
Mm-hmm.
years. I've had to learn those hard lessons,
Mm-hmm.
but I am a huge advocate for mentorship of myself and of others because we don't have to continue to suffer in ways that others have learned those hard lessons for us if we're willing to listen, if we're willing to digest and then implement these other hard lessons. Like I've been the person that's undercharged. I remember going to this doula training and it was very, again, it's probably one of the most comprehensive trainings that I've attended. And we were being encouraged to be volunteers. And then I had an aha moment because this person was taking trips to Costa Rica and Mexico and all this every year with their child. And I was just like, yeah, I want to be able to do that. But the math isn't mathing.
Yeah.
Like, how do I do that as a volunteer doula? So I
Mm-hmm.
came back a couple of months after the training and I was like, hey, could you just share with me how you're able to do this? I know that you have these other things, but somehow it's tied to your doula work. Like, how do you do this? And so she broke it down for me, just certain allocations. She had a certain amount of births that she volunteered for.
Mm-hmm.
And she had a certain amount of births that she charged top dollar for. And that compensated for the volunteer work that she was doing, but it wasn't necessarily communicated very clearly in the
Right.
training.
Right.
That is, but again, that's a business conversation a little bit, right?
Yeah.
What are your streams of income?
Sure.
How many pro
Yeah.
bono births are you giving? And
Right.
so when that happened, it was like, okay. And then it was on to the pricing changes. I didn't know that I was undercharging until I was at a 36-hour home birth. And I wound up making like less than $7 an hour. And I was like, whoa,
Yeah.
oh yeah, that
That's
boundaries,
that's
you
not
know.
even half of minimum wage. Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so it's like you learn, but if you learn,
Mm-hmm.
I think in this space, it's an obligation of mine, I feel, to
Mm-hmm.
share that and to help other people
Mm-hmm.
start stronger. So I have mentees where I'm like, listen, don't even charge less than this to start, period. And so now they've been able to have these flourishing practices, not so much because they're so experienced, but just because their pricing
Mm-hmm.
model
Mm-hmm.
is intact from the beginning. And then they can grow. And then
Mm-hmm.
as things are tweaked and they start to see gaps in their own life and their own needs, they can adjust their pricing accordingly. But just having someone say, hey, you need to do this because these are all the areas of your life that it affects.
Mm-hmm.
Those are hard lessons that I had to
Yeah.
learn
Yeah. For sure.
myself.
Yeah, it's great that you're passing that along. And like I think you were saying to your point that if you do have some sustainability in what your rates are, then you can do the pro bono work that your like a helper heart wants to do. But you can't do that if you can't pay rent.
Exactly. Exactly. Hard lessons.
Uh,
Hard lessons.
yeah, for sure. And you mentioned some of the work that you're going expanding into bigger, like systematic work. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, more recently, earlier this year, between January and April, I've done some lobbying in the state of Oregon for SB 692, which was a bill, I believe it's getting signed into law by the governor this next week, if I'm not
Yay.
mistaken. But standing side by side with other local doulas and other organizations like the Children's Institute, the Black Futures Perinatal Collective, those are all located in Oregon and do a lot of amazing work. Mother Tree International, a doula training organization, just a huge group of us going and telling our stories at the Senate, at the House, advocating for expanded pay. Oregon and Washington State and California as well are some of the top paying states when it comes to doula reimbursement. And so advocating even further with SB 692, we were advocating for extended doula support postpartum, up to a year, extending it from 3 visits to 12 visits. Like, these are things we're telling the story. Like, what does this look like? When I was living there, I was living in a rural community in Oregon, and it had very different challenges. And so, what are the ways that we can also boost the economy by making sure that doulas have sustainable income? One of the things that I don't think our politicians and all the people that are making these decisions understand is that when you nurture that heart, that giving, that bottom class of folks, typically, right? The caregivers, the doulas, the just all the people that are there doing this work, when you're actually making sure they have a sustainable life, they're going to stimulate the economy. It's straightforward. We're going to come up with collectives. We're going to come up with little boutiques. We're going to come up with all these things that are ultimately going to pour back into our communities. And so it's not just about those doulas over there getting paid well. It's really about economic stability overall. And so that's some of the work that I've been doing as well. And then consulting with maternal health organizations that have existing doulas that they train and hire, helping them with their business hubs and business development to make sure that the doulas are not only trained well, which is a doula training aspect that I'm not a part of. I come in and I do doula business hubs with those organizations and offer those workshops and help them really understand, because business can be intimidating. Just saying, business, I got to do business. It's, let's take this information, and I guess that's the creative part of me, and let me communicate this in a way that is understandable, right? When you're, I've done some writing for Healthline as well, some articles, and my editor, it was a requirement. We have to write it to an 8th grade reading level.
Right.
So I believe the same thing about some of those other important pieces of information, whether it's business acumen, all of that, we need to be able to communicate that to at least an 8th grade understanding level so that people have more access to tools that will help them thrive and survive longer. And so those are some other ways in advocacy and teaching and consulting that Akionu and myself, as the leader of a lot of those workshops, that's a bit more about what we're doing as well to make an impact.
That's amazing. And I know you were talking about reimbursement rates. Are you specifically talking about Medicaid reimbursement?
And yes, and the state of Washington State, they're at, I believe, $3,500 from prenatal, attending the birth, and postpartum care. A doula can make up to $3,500 per birth. That is the highest and the most sustainable rate in the nation right now. And I believe Oregon and California are close second and third with 2,500, 3,000 reimbursement for the same thing. There's a varying amount of visits included per state, but the state of Washington is making huge strides there. But, and I think we talked about this a little bit when we first met, with that now comes, what are the challenges and what do we have to look out for now that we have these sustainable rates coming through? And they're not sustainable nationwide. But one of the things that we're seeing and that I want people to have their eye on and be advocating locally is that now we've seen some hospital providers coercing their patients into using their Medicaid allocation with only their doula on staff. So some hospitals have doula programs that are on staff. Speak plainly.
Please.
Okay, it's a money grab. They're going, oh, $3,500. Let's get that in our budget. Let's funnel that through our only this set amount of doulas. We're not taking into account whether it's a great personality match, whether it's a cultural competent match. We're not taking any, we're just looking at this dollar amount. And now that we know we can get reimbursed, now that coercion is shifting into that space. It's unacceptable.
Yeah.
We need to keep our eyes on it, and people need to be held accountable. And so, yeah, that's something that's happening as well. With the positive things, there's coming some other challenges.
So is that, let's say, sort of day terms, a mom decides she's going to birth at a certain hospital, has a doula that she wants to work with. She goes to that hospital, and does the hospital say no, that your doula can't come in, you have to use our doula, and you have like how?
Yes. So
Okay.
in the examples that I have been privy to, it's been quiet. It hasn't been in writing, but it's been, hey, in order to use a doula, you have to use our doula and you have to use your Medicaid. This is coming from one of the organizations that I consult with. They provide scholarships.
Okay.
And so it's free to the family, and the doula is paid through a grant in that organization. Essentially, we could look at it as private pay. If that person has Medicaid, they're telling them, no, you cannot use that doula that is being provided free to you by this organization. And you have to use our staff doula, and you have to be billing Medicaid for it. So it's forcing them to pay this hospital $3,500, their doula support. But it's not a doula that they match with. It's not a doula that they want.
That isn't the hospital getting paid anyways?
Oh, they're getting paid for all the things.
So the additional, I guess it would be, it's just another revenue stream that they're pulling from, so they're not having to pull from their own.
It's not even that they don't have to pull for their own. It's basically greedy.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And it's a way to try to keep it now, because now the next step, and I think this is what we need to watch out for, is any hospital system that then begins to have a policy. Now, what I will say is I spent some time in Colorado, and I wanted to work at the hospital as a doula because they had schedules. I had young children. I'm like, hey, I'd love to take this morning shift, not be on call. So there's a lot of benefits as well to working within a doula cohort that is associated with the hospital. Excuse me. So you can only be certified by a particular top two organizations in order to work at this hospital.
Okay.
All billing was done by the hospital, and they don't actually have to reimburse you at the full rate. So when I push that forward over what's happening with Medicaid, they can bill 3,500 and pay the doulas 2,000 and say that's enough. That's all you need.
Got it. Wow.
So if we're not careful, what we could be witnessing and we need to be prepared for is advocating against hospital organizations and larger organizations making rules that people that interact with their healthcare system can only use their doulas. That's going to be the next thing that we need to keep an eye on.
So it's like taking away the birthing person's choice to potentially, I guess, worst case scenario, also taking finances from the doula. The doula is not getting paid what they could or should be.
And then also cutting off the greater community of doulas,
Oh,
because everyone does not want to work within a healthcare system in that way.
sure.
But behind that wall, there's also other concerns. And we've seen some of those concerns in those hospital doula programs where they could say, oh, we have enough doulas, we're not hiring anyone else. And it's just the demographics, what's the diversity isn't diversifying. And it's just, oh, this is an easy way. And then is that client truly supported? If they're not supported by someone that they chose, that they vetted, that they were paired with and decided upon. And so that's the other implication. And again, I like to just keep it simple. It will eventually impact the economics of that city because the community doulas will be losing sustainability, financial sustainability. And so this healthcare system could actually be impacting the community economics. And that's something that I don't hear enough people talking about as well when it comes to situations like this.
Wow. Yeah, I obviously didn't have any understanding or know that this kind of thing was happening. So it's great to hear you expand on it here and teach people. What can people do?
The number one thing is to advocate. And so for yourself. So in these, there's been about 3 situations that I've heard of. And unfortunately, they're just now starting to happen. So if you haven't heard about it, it's only because these reimbursement rates are just getting signed into law just in the last couple of years. This is not, we're going to see more of it in the future. In each of these circumstances, the birthing person was being coerced. they were made to feel afraid that if they didn't do what they were being asked to do, that they weren't going to be supported well in that hospital. Mm. So one of the first things that we can do, I highly suggest that doulas are really leaning into teaching their clients self-advocacy. We have to focus on that. We are not there to speak for them every single step of the way, but we also have to start training them in our prenatal. Hey, let's practice. This is what coercion looks like. We need to be educating them on what does coercion look and feel like. Yeah. And one of my favorite lines, and I've been using it for years, could you document that in my chart? It is one of the most powerful statements that any patient can ever make, whether you're giving birth or not. You, me, when we're in the space, could you please document that in my chart? You want to know why? Because liability is their language.
Oh, sure.
Hospitals speak the language of liability. And once you ask them to document anything in their chart, they are now liable for saying yes, saying no, any test that's run or not run. And not enough people know that's such a simple way.
Right.
You could be saying, my head hurts, and they're, oh, you'll be fine. Okay, could you document in my chart that I've let you know that I have a really sharp pain on the left side of my head, and you've told me that I'm okay. That way, if you're having an aneurysm and something happens to you, that hospital or that healthcare system will be responsible for neglect. And so you don't need to be combative. You don't need to argue with people. You just simply need to ask for things to be documented in your chart. And it's something that I have seen work out beautifully with my clients, whether I'm there in the space or not, because healthcare systems and hospitals, they speak the language of liability.
Okay, that's very useful. Just starting there, being able to know if you're being coerced or not, advocate for yourself, and have documentation. I've heard that in other scenarios, if it wasn't written down, it didn't happen, kind of, it just in terms of legal perspectives type of a thing. Okay, so you've been involved in trying to raise awareness about this, trying to be a voice to let people know, and you're also using your voice and your creativity in other ways. What can you talk a little bit about your other project?
Yeah, my husband and I shot a short film. It's called Jazz and the Blues. And we recently were able to show it and present a workshop at the PSI conference in New Orleans earlier this summer. And my husband is an amazing videographer, filmmaker, producer. I have a background as a singer and just overall creative, love theater, all the things. And so it's my husband, so we chat and chew at night. What about this? What about that? And as we were just talking about how to get people to really understand what postpartum families are experiencing and what's a creative way that we could put that out visually. And so being both musicians, loving music, we were really just discussing. Now, I'm African American. I have a lot of other things in my family, but that is my primary cultural background. And jazz and the blues, as we know, is something that African Americans have contributed very largely to this country's musical landscape. And so it has been a musical genre to communicate our emotions, our pain, our joy, our lust, our happiness, our everything, anything that you could think of, frustration. And so we decided to create this short film using jazz and blues music to tell the emotional story of this newly postpartum family. And so it is something that we are very proud of and very excited to bring to our community. When you're talking about maternal mental health, and this is something that we talked about in our workshop, it's one band, one sound. So you are a piece of the band. You may be the drums. I may be the trumpet. The family that we are supporting might be the piano or the saxophone or whatever it is. But when we're talking about doulas, when we're talking about therapists, psychotherapists, everyone that is a team in support, if we're not careful, and we get too focused on ourselves, we will create something called dissonance. And that's where you hear that really like irritating, where it's just, hey, are you listening to the rest of what's going on here?
Yeah.
If we're not mindful practitioners, we can be a part of someone's care team causing dissonance. And so when you look at jazz and the blues and the fact that they're mostly improvisational, right? Scatting and just different solos. That is how postpartum is. You don't always know what's going to come up. You don't always know the next note. You don't always know the next feeling. And so our short film really demonstrates that musically and visually. We're really taking people through a very short, quick journey of what the main character, her name is Jasmine, and her husband are navigating these feelings. And again, the score is done through jazz and the blues. And at the end of the film, there's a piece where it's to give hope and to brighten. And I don't know if you've actually had a chance to view it, but there's a piece in there with how the community, your family, can come in, depending on who it is, and provide a ray of hope. But support is the hope that we all need. We need therapists. We need family members, depending on whether or not they're causing dissonance or not. Yep. But hopefully, when you're able to be self-aware and to advocate for yourself, you can pick and choose who those people are and make sure that we need each other, but that we're supporting each other. But in this culture, it's like we're so nuclear. And then we're wondering why our songs are just like flat and dry and just dehydrated, and we are not flourishing. Whereas, listen, we all have a role. But guess what? If I was the postpartum doula and you were the therapist for a client, I need to be in sync with you too. You need to be in sync with me as we're in sync supporting them, as does their spouse or their partner or their family members. Everyone, with the children, if they already have older children, it's a song and it's improvisational. And so we're really excited about bringing that conversation as well to practitioners, because sometimes we get isolated in our own world. It's all the birth doulas over there, all the postpartum doulas over there, all the therapists, psychotherapists, all the labels, they separate us. But what we really need to do is be in this big pot together, like a big old gumbo. We need to be supporting our clients together, making beautiful improvisational music that supports each family that we serve postpartum. And so Jazz and the Blues is a short film that highlights that need and really, hopefully, highlights also the partners. 1 in 10 men experience postpartum depression. I don't know if that number has shifted more recently to increase or decrease, but we weren't talking about postpartum depression in men at all for a very long time. And so our film also highlights just how that manifests differently and how that shows up differently, as well as what it looks like to be that birthing person, the one that just gave birth and not feeling supported. And when we're both going through stuff, we're not in competition. We both, the whole family, needs support. And so that is the aim and the goal of our film, is to highlight that in a musical, creative, and a beautiful way.
Yeah, that's just amazing and important on so many levels, because to your point earlier, you're right. We can all feel siloed and separate, and which I think also obviously makes the birthing person and the family who's bringing a life into the world, they feel isolated if we're all disparate and separate and not even in any kind of communication or rhythm together. Everybody feels alone.
Yeah.
It's that's a lot of weight to carry for any one person to feel like, and not that we wouldn't or gladly support somebody if we were the only one, but everybody feels better. Everybody feels better when they know that there's community support there and everybody has each other.
Yeah, it's so important. And no matter how resourced someone is or how much they lack a resource, I've never seen a family not need comprehensive support. I've supported a family that had all the parents, they all had healthy relationships, they were all cooking all the food, they were all showing up, and there was still a space for me to support that family. a little bit with meals, a lot with lactation support, traditional postpartum medicine where, doing the hammams and the closing of the bones and educating the external family members that were there for. But someone could say, oh my gosh, they have so many people, they have all the things. They don't need support. They did. Just as much as I've supported a young single parent that had no extended family and no resources. They needed just as much support as one another. And that's not something that we acknowledge very often, is that no matter how resourced or not, we all need support.
No, you're absolutely right. So where can people find the short film?
Right now, we're only presenting it in workshop form, but if they would like to bring it to their organization for a showing or a screening, they can reach out to me via email, jacqueline@akionu.app. We do have the trailer on our website, which is akionu.app. You can see the trailer there. And then again, if you want to send an email to bring it, we are pretty much bringing it with the workshop to have these conversations in different professional settings. And then eventually we did a screening last year that was virtual, but I think right now we're focused mostly on bringing it with the workshop to organizations and healthcare systems to get those conversations started.
Yeah, all of the things that you're doing, I'm sure, are so well received because they're all so needed.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of good work that you're doing. So if you can also talk a little bit about how having a doula who's matched, any doula, but a doula who's matched to your needs, how that can support a birthing person's mental health.
Absolutely. So let me start off by saying that perspective matters. And so when you feel seen and supported, regardless of the outcomes, you tend to have a more positive mental health outcome, even if things don't go your way. And so in the beginning, not even necessarily that someone is the same ethnicity as you, but someone who shares the same values that you, that is able to communicate with you in a way that you understand and digest. As issues come up, concerns come up, they're able to alleviate your concerns. They're able to meet you where you are. You don't feel judged. You feel heard. You feel listened to. You feel guided, and you feel advocated for. That produces confidence within yourself. Now, when the birth progresses and maybe some things happen that you weren't planning, that same doula that communicates well with you, that sees you, that hears you, that speaks your same language, so to speak, they're able to inform you of some changes, give you some guidance, some advice, respect your choices, but also be able to stand in and suggest things that might need to happen for the highest and best outcome. That's something I talk about. Highest and best. Highest and best isn't always what is on your birth plan. But when you're matched well with someone and you feel comfortable, you feel seen, your body responds as well. You feel physically safe. These are all things that affect a birth outcome as well. If you don't feel safe with your doula, your body will clam up. When your body clams up, your labor may stall. There might be different things, blood pressure, all these things can come into play. So it's not just that you have a doula, it's someone that hears you, that sees you, that respects you, that hopefully you feel loved. You feel seen and respected. These are literal components that will actually help you have a better health outcome. Now, when it comes to the perspective piece and the mental health piece, how you view something impacts your mental health. And I know I'm preaching to the choir by telling you that, but just being able to shift your mindset about something and having set expectations about how things could or could not go, not being fixed, being flexible. Those also we've seen, and I believe there's some research that I just read about recently, that alone can allow you to have a more positive view of your birth story, whether you birth the way you plan to or not. So if you're matched with someone that respects you, that supports you every step of the way, but also communicates with you and helps you to have a proper perspective on what could happen, we've seen that as a positive impact in the birth outcome, regardless of how that person actually birthed. And so to say that it doesn't matter what doula you have, it's not true. Just like it matters what all the other providers you have, Who are the
Right.
nurses? Who are the midwives? Who are the OBs? Just because it's a midwife doesn't mean that you're going to have an amazing experience with that. And culturally, I will say that's a huge piece as well because there's a ton of unspoken things. You don't want to, why are you doing that? Or what's that? Or ill? Or no. Cultural competence is important, but then also core values is important. Understanding that you and the person that's supporting you either have a level of respect for
Yeah.
or share those core values, that's something as well that helps people feel supported and allows them to feel safe in birth. And so being matched well, it definitely has an amazing positive impact on how people view and how they see their birth experience.
It's so incredibly important. This is such a huge life change going through the process of trying to conceive, to being pregnant, to birth and postpartum, that anywhere along the way, if you have somebody, or ideally all the way along the way, if you have somebody who can see you and be there with you in all the ways that you've described, how much more of a positive impact that can be just on that experience, but moving forward, because those experiences stay with you. You remember that stuff, and you remember it in your mind, but you remember it in your body. Like in all of those ways, it's so important to have what you're describing.
Yeah. In doulas, we provide continuous care. You're not necessarily outside of that 6 week visit. You're not going to see the nurses again. You're not going to really interact too heavily with the OB. And so that's the other powerful piece about doula care is that we're with you prenatally. We're
Right.
with you at that birth. And then we're also with you after you have that baby, and we've got eyes on you. So even if you are experiencing mental health shifts, we are a powerful referral source that is actually plugged in, and we can say, hey, this is her baseline. This is their baseline. Something has shifted. And we're able to make a powerful referral as well and be an amazing intervention for clients postpartum and with their maternal mental health. And so,
So
yeah.
good. So good. Well, I thank you so much for sharing all of this with us today, for all the work that you're doing. This is amazing, really getting at it from so many different angles and so powerfully through art and business and just the whole package. It's beautiful work you're
Thank
doing.
you.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor and a pleasure.
Thank you. You can connect with Jacqueline's work by finding her on Instagram at courageous_motherhood or on Instagram at akionu_app. That is spelled OKIONU. If this conversation has brought you new information or you know that somebody could benefit from hearing this, please do pass it along. These conversations are super important, especially as we're trying to learn more about how we can adjust and fix the gaps in care and raise awareness so that we know that those gaps exist, so that we can be looking out for moms and doulas who are trying to provide and support for people going through the transition to parenthood. I thank you so much for being with us today. Until next time.